Are you way down there?
That's what that.
I don't. This is where my pocket was. And this is my go-to seat. I'm a creature of habit. When is your trip?
We leave Wednesday.
Did you ever book a place?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We're about 5 blocks from the Eiffel Tower.
Amazing. I think you'll have a better experience knowing you've already booked the place versus going over.
My wife is very, very happy that we go. I'm kind of like, when we get there, we'll just pick
Right.
something.
Did you go Airbnb or did you
1 minute.
book a hotel?
Hotel on there. But we got an Airbnb in Switzerland.
I can't wait to hear everything. I'm so excited. I love Europe.
Oh, 100%. Pretty full. Yes. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. First item is the prayer and pledge of allegiance. And Scott, if you don't mind.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this wonderful day, Lord. We just thank you for this opportunity to gather here, Lord, and just pray for wisdom as we discuss the things that need to be discussed for our community, Lord. Just be with each of our citizens, Lord. Just guide and direct them, and just be with us here this morning. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a few business items for the EDTA to do ahead of time, and then we'll move to the Aquatic Center proposal for funding. And Courtney, I just realized I think this is the wrong agenda that I had Darla print out.
Okay.
It doesn't include the new.
Oh, yes.
Yep. Yeah, if you don't mind. Sorry, guys, we had an amendment to the agenda. You already checked 2 things off.
We have to start over?
No.
Okay.
We thought you might be recycling this stuff. So
So now it's actually going to take longer than the last meeting.
It's already taken longer than the last meeting.
Thank you.
I'll be good.
Okay,
Can I check?
you can. The first thing on this is to approve the minutes from the October 21st, 2024 meeting. You do have those in your packet.
So move.
A second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Courtney, if you don't mind taking the vote, please.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Sordahl,
Yes.
Durr,
Yes.
Okay, the next item is discussion and possible action to approve the 2025 EDTA meeting schedule, which is in your packet. Again, these would all fall mostly on the second Monday of each month at noon. There are some adjustments for holidays. And then if any of those become an issue, we can always do a special meeting like we've done in the past.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Courtney, if you would do the vote.
Anderson,
Yes.
Sordahl,
Yes.
Durr,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Next item, discussion and possible action to approve payment of invoice from Becky Clark for Christmas light work for $901.41. $719.92 is to be paid from the donation funds and $181.49 from Fund 68 funds. And if you'll remember, all of those, with the exception of Fund 68, are all donated funds that were made to the EDTA for this purpose. And we do still have that balance in the account.
So move.
Have a motion?
Second.
Okay. Courtney, the vote?
Sordahl,
Yes.
Durr,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes. The next item is discussion and possible action to approve payment of invoices from Becky Clark for Christmas light work that will be completed between November 10th, 24 and December 13th, 24 for up to the amount received in donations to be paid from the Holiday Lights Display Account 989855243. What this is for is Becky is wrapping up the Christmas lights. We do still have those funds in the account. We've got one check for $1,250 that will be here on Monday that will increase that balance. So this is allowing us to make payment of those for that work that she's completed up to the full amount in the donation account, if that's what the invoices are for.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, Courtney, if you do the vote.
Dirk,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Sorrell,
Yes.
And then the next item is discussion and possible action regarding accepting a proposal from Placer AI for a 3-year agreement to provide data services for use by the EDTA in the city, and authorizing the EDTA chair to work with Placer AI to prepare the contract for EDTA approval. The total cost of the initial term is $27,000, invoiced over 3 years, $8,000 upon signing, $9,000 in the second year, and $10,000 in the third year. So if you remember a few months ago, we did take a look at the Placer AI data. Mike was here for that presentation and helped with it. This is a follow-up to that meeting where we went and talked with GRDA. Bridget with Main Street and I went and talked with GRDA, and the plan is that once we enter into the agreement, GRDA, through a relationship with MUB, will fund between $6,000 and $6,600 each year of that invoice. They will provide that funding to MUB, who will then send it on to us to offset that cost. So the first 2 years they will do that. The third year, there was not a solid commitment on that, but there is an indication that by the third year they would be ready to continue that relationship. So at the beginning, we would have about $12,000 to $13,200 paid for by a relationship with between GRDA and MUB. And everything else would stay the same within that presentation that Placer AI did. The way I believe the contract will look, and that's why I want to get the approval to look at the contract and then bring that in for final approval, is it will be a contract by the EDTA on behalf of the city of Pryor. And the reason it would be the city of Pryor is the owner of the URL, the @pryorcreek.org. That's what will give all of the departments within Pryor the ability to use this under the one license. So any questions or thoughts on that?
Well, and just briefly, again, as I indicated, with GRDA helping, I think that makes me a little more favorable to this. Because my concern before, if we were bearing the expense solely, I don't want to be buying another toy that just really shines and looks nice, but we don't know how to use it, or we don't utilize it. With GRDA inputting that helps, that takes kind of the initial shock off from it. And so if it is something, and I understand this is a contract that will be signed by the EDTA,
Yes.
so we will have control and use, and,
Mhm.
okay. And so if the stats get used and the data gets used, yeah, that's wonderful. We just need to make sure we utilize this data and not just say, isn't that a wonderful toy and that really looks interesting? But we need to use the data to promote prior businesses coming in and events that we're doing.
And in talking with Courtney, I'm at the city clerk's office, Houston at the chamber, and Bridget at Main Street, we plan to have a frequent report that comes to the EDTA listing all of the events that go on in Pryor that show the data coming directly from Placer AI for what those counts are. I know that Houston's talked with a couple of different prospects coming into Pryor that have indicated it would be very important if they could get an accurate count, especially of bluegrass. I know we've used that a couple of times. The first count just showed what was in the green space, and it was about 4,000 to 5,000. The second count, which included going down Main Street, took that up to over 8,000, wasn't it, Courtney?
That sounds about right.
I think it was over 8,000 once we included all of Main Street and the green space. So getting it into a report format that's consistently updated, I think is important. And I kind of envision that going into the Main Street MOU that we're working on for presentation in December as well, to have that as a requirement of that MOU, that they constantly update that for all of us. And I think from talking to Courtney, your office is pretty excited to have some solid counts of these activities downtown. Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to, yeah.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, if you would do the vote, please.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Sorrell,
Yes.
Dirk,
Yes.
Scott's kind of like dealing with your brother on the school board.
Now you know what.
And then number 7, the reason that we have more people in attendance at one of these than we've ever had, the presentation and discussion of the Aquatic Center funding study by Swanson House. I'll say ahead of time, these ladies in Swanson House have done a lot of work, interviews. The community has really opened up and given them some honest feedback, I believe. Mike and I had a little bit of a pre-review of some of these items, and I think I think there's some great things in the study. I think, as we said to begin with, it was a necessary part of going down this path. I think it's going to make us take an honest look at some things and some realizations that we have some things that really need to happen for Pryor to move forward. And I think this is a beginning stage of having some documentation and evidence of proof of those things that we need to do. Mike, have you got anything you want to?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank our committee for their work so far. We're not done. I want to thank the EDTA for the funding and support in that regard, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to get the thing off the ground. As Adam said, we're a little privy to the results. Sarah and Brenda will get into that in just a minute, but the mindset is that we'll take that information and move forward and do something. I think that's the goal, is to make something happen. We'll sift through it. I've got sent out a notice this morning. You may have seen it. We'll have another meeting of our committee in December to decipher kind of what goes on, the information we get today, and then we'll assess next steps and keep this thing moving. It's kind of slow but steady, but it's a big project, as you know, and so we're very intent on making something happen. So, again, thank you all.
Okay. Well, ladies?
All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Sarah Wine, and we're with Swanson House, and I have Brenda Vogner here. We had the privilege and honor of working with you on this study, and some of you I recognize, and then some of you, I'm sure if I heard your name, I would recognize that from a phone call. But we have enjoyed working with you on this project, coming into your community, being able to learn more about what you have here and who you are, and that's been a delight for us. So thank you for that. We are going to be going over some information today. We have one report that is a little bit more easily digestible. This is the larger report, so you were talking about that documentation and information. So we've got a big report here, but what we're going to do, we're going to walk through the summary of what we have found. The idea of this feasibility study was to look at the process of a $24 million campaign intentionally and with forethought and with the purpose of being very thorough in how this happens and supporting the community. Those have been accomplished. You have been very intentional about this. There's been a lot of diligent work put into this and a lot of information. Today we are going to talk through everything, but as far as the $24 million study, we unfortunately do not have the ability to say that we found a feasibility for that. There is some capacity in this community and with this potential project, but not what we find at the $24 million level. But as we talked about, this is not the end of the road. This is a look at what some of those options might be should you look at moving forward. So we're going to walk through this. It's something that we can all read and digest together. But just looking at some of the highlights, this is a lot of information. So please feel free to stop me at any point. I have a 9-year-old. I'm very used to being interrupted. So please interrupt at any time. Ask whatever questions you have. The beginning is just an overview of what we have found. So it walks through that it was a proposed $24 million project, and that our study reveals that it's more about $3 to $5 million is what we see being raised in a private setting. There is a possibility of, if you were to explore other options beyond just the private, that if there was a combination of tax funding and philanthropy, that there would be more support with that. The study showed that there is more support for that direction. So as part of the study, it's an interview and a survey. So we had 38 individuals who participated in the interview and 11 who participated in a survey. So the information that we got back does show that there would be support in exploring that route. When we talk about this, it is a larger project. The impact is available, and that was very much recognized with the study. There is a interest, there is a passion for the community, and there's an understanding for the project of what those benefits are, which is a very good thing. We used that test case statement, and I think many of you would have received it, as part of that project of presenting the information and then exploring what those questions were like. So we're going to dive into the study findings, but that's the overall where we are. So before I get into some of these questions and the responses, are there any questions right off the bat? Okay, we'll keep going, but again, if you have any questions, yes?
Great. So in the initial conversation, you mentioned something about you mentioned potential bond.
I'm sorry?
Potential bond to maybe help facilitate pay for this.
So that would be a little bit more of the public side. So the study itself was about the private. Yes. So because we want to make sure that we are gathering as much information, the study itself was private, but in an effort to gain as much information beforehand, there were questions as part of those conversations of if this were to be something, would this be something you would consider or support? And so it was more of the public component as a...
Looking for support, willingness to, and again, all of that ties into if we were to ask for a potential bond down the road, you would have evidence to support that they would want to do that. And then also at 3 to 5 million privately be able to raise that privately without.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I just wanted to understand that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sir, I think this may be the same question. Are you telling us that if the public, the people that you talked with, perceived that we were willing to put taxpayer funds in, they would be more receptive to make a private donation?
In a nutshell, yes, I believe so. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but essentially with that question, it's by having a joint venture, essentially, your public seeing the contributions of the private would have more confidence, desire, and then from the private side, they would see the public support of having buy-in as an entirety for the whole community. So they would play into each other, if that answers that. Okay. Well, the first question with the study was about the benefits of the project. This is where we really try to find out, does the community see the need? Does the community support that need? And with this, we did find that there was agreement that there is interest in this and that the benefits that we have presented are understood and appreciated. So it breaks it down into a few different areas that have that were reoccurring themes. In this giant study, we have a lot of those samples. So the questions, or the responses are listed in here. Everything is confidential, so there are no names attached to it. But the comments that were recurring or that became very prevalent are listed in here and then summarized as well. So what we were finding with that first question is that it is seen as a major quality of life project, that it would be beneficial to all of the current residents, city, area, county. And that there is also an eco-devo component involved, that it would be something that could draw employees to the city and county and retain their employees and the families of the employees. And it also creates a healthy and positive activity for youth to be engaged, that it's something that for the kids that are going to be out of school in the summer, it gives them a healthy outlet to utilize when they're not engaged at school. And also that beyond the youth aspect, that it is also something for general gathering space, that it is something from the babies, the toddlers, all the way up to the older community, that it's something that is going to be a community piece, that it would be something that brings the community together in one location. And the next question is, what are the most effective messages for this project? And the answers are very similar to the first question, which is a good thing. It's saying that they believe strongly in what the benefits are, and that the benefits are going to be what is driving that message moving into a campaign. And again, it's family focused and healthy living, quality of life. And then it is also something that is unique within a 40-mile radius, so that it would be something that brings outside community people into your community, which is an economic development message. And that it could be used for recruiters and getting employees here, because it would be an amenity for them and for their families. And as people are coming into our community, they want to have something that appeals to them. And that it would also it would work to build that community pride and identity, that it gives something about uniting everyone and being very community driven, so being a focal point. And the next question, are there questions that need to be addressed to garner greater community support for this project? So this is where we were starting to look at how to move forward and engage with the donor aspect of it. And there were 3 common themes that we were seeing with this, that it was questions, but also encouragement of what to be considered. And that first one is having a meaningful response to managing the facility and funding its ongoing operations. So thinking beyond just the building of it, who's going to be managing it, who's going to be connected with it, who will oversee things, all of those questions, and wanting to make sure that that is solidly in place. And the respondents generally seemed open to the idea of public support in the form of taxation. They were in agreement that it was something that they would see as potentially a positive thing, that they would be willing to be engaged with. And so we would encourage exploring some of those and thinking of what those public funding options might be, as well as the education behind that to explain what those vehicles are. And again, you asked about the bonds, and that's in there as part of that, of really diving into what those mean and how it would impact the community. And then we start looking at the cost, and the cost of the project overall, that $24 million budget, did seem very overwhelming for individuals, and there were many who asked about the possibility of either scaling back the project to reduce that number, or if there was a possibility of phasing the project and looking at it in separate segments.
Sarah?
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, because I know in those task force meetings, we had talked about phasing it. One of the things that Mike and I talked about with Sarah up front was, should they lead with it having the potential to be phased? And their recommendation was to let's see how it looks when we say here's the full product, and let the community give feedback about that. And I think that is kind of one of those things that led back to the community would like to see potentially it phase and support that. So just so you guys know why it was presented as 24 million and not as 4 phases or whatever, it was because that's what our consultants said was the best way to go in with that, was the full package, and then see what community feedback was, and where it led with those phasings.
And thank you for saying that, because that's true, and it's one of these things where it's harder to add on later on, and then in some cases, if there is more capacity, then we want to know what those dream goals are. So that was at the beginning of saying, let's look at this as a whole picture, and then see what that result is. And I will also add, tying into this a little bit, it was a question that was asked. It was already something that had been considered. So that is also a reflection of these responses are not always going to be what simple answers, where these are the perception of the respondents. And so it doesn't mean that it's accurate, but it is a reflection reflection of the comment is something that is perceived. So even if so knowing it has been discussed, that doesn't always reflect in what the respondents are commenting. So yes.
Maybe a question here on tying the benefits to the scope. Were the benefits that you identified here based upon a year-round facility that was going to be available, or were they based upon, because I heard you say something about summer, or were they based just on a summer facility that operated, during those 10 weeks that we typically operate a pool?
Yes, so the question was the timeline of the aquatic center. And with the aquatic center test case statement, it does identify it as a summer outdoor project.
Okay.
That it would be on the timeline of what an outdoor public pool, your former public pool would have been on, so the summer months. Okay, and then the next question was about the funding of the project. And so there are some comments that are a little similar, but again, they came up with some dominant themes. And few believe that the $24 million in private funding can be raised for the aquatic center. A majority of people encouraged a framework in which a minority portion of funding was secured for charitable support and giving, and a majority of funding from public funding. So this was mentioned by many and understood as a potential and beneficial. And a majority of respondents continue to recommend that the scope of the project, the cost of the project, be reduced as a means to make the project a reality. When we are asking these questions with the interviews and with the survey, we ask our participants, would they consider participating in a capital campaign as a donor? So it's not a commitment or anything, it's just, given what you know with this test case statement, is this something that you would consider supporting financially? And 62% of your respondents said yes, 37% said maybe, and 22% said no. With Swanson House, we've done a large number of these studies, and what we tend to find is the average for that question is more like 41% yes, 27% maybe, and 32% no. So in looking at the comparison of what our average is, you did have a higher than average responding of saying yes, people would consider financially supporting, which is an excellent thing. We just didn't get the capacity behind the passion. So there were lots of yeses, but still only capacity-wise, we found about 3 to 5 million.
So Sarah, I think that's interesting and a difference than what we at the task force had thought it would be. We thought it would be responses that came back heavy on donations and charitable contributions that would pay for the majority, and that some bond or tax structure for a minority of it. But you're saying that you actually got the opposite back. You got people were supporting private donations for a smaller portion of it, and the lion's share of it really to be under the taxpayers and a bond of some sort. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I will say that we did the study based off of the private funding. So we did not have major questioning about that public funding or what that number might look like. So we're a little limited on what we can say as far as what that would look like if you went that route, as far as what you might be able to do on the public side, what number to think of or consider. So we're approaching the study from a private capacity, but as far as that is the leaning that we did receive.
To give everybody a kind of a clear picture of what that could look like, we recently did a public-private project where the community, the public side, said if the private can come up with 2.7 million, then the city is committed to 6.5 million. So in essence, they said, we will put in the 6.5 once you have the 2.7 raised. So it was a commitment on both sides. And then the city passed it once the 2.7 was raised in gifts and pledges.
And again, that was majority public, minority private. And the next question was campaign leadership. Each individual was asked would they consider serving as a part of the capital leadership campaign committee. should the campaign move forward, that they would be willing to be a part of that process as a member of those committees. So there were 23 individuals who agreed that they would consider it, and that's a good number. We tend to find that that number shrinks a little bit once you actually get to that part of the process, but that you would still have a solid number, even if it did shrink from 23.
And Sarah, would you share with them your thoughts that you shared with, I think it was the full task force, about the makeup of that campaign leadership or funding committee versus maybe the full task force? Because, we have those discussions about whether it should be the same group, whether it should be the EDTA, and you kind of come up with some suggestions on that maybe should look differently.
Yes, so with the makeup of a nonprofit going into a capital campaign, there's typically a board associated. In this case, the task force seems to be somewhat similar in what their goals are as far as supporting the cause or the project. And then as a separate entity from that, it would be the campaign leadership committee. So these are individuals that are specifically a part of this process, start to finish, the life of the campaign, and are there to serve in a number of different roles. It's individuals who have the ability to open doors to connections or to make solicitations. And there are some individuals who say, I do not want to ask for anyone for money, and that's perfectly fine. It's a unique thing to be able to do, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's perfectly fine. So there are some individuals who would be a part of that by being a part of the solicitation. There are also individuals who say, I don't want to be a part of the ask, but I know people, and I can start that conversation. And that can be as simple as going along on the solicitation, or it can be providing a name and then reaching out to that individual and saying, hey, Adam's going to be calling you. I would love it if you would have a conversation with him. It's something I'm interested in, and I think you might be interested in it as well. So those individuals are part of the process in regard to that aspect of fundraising, and then also just oversight of the fundraising in itself. And those individuals tend to be about half that are part of the board, and then half that are outside of that committee, outside of the board. So usually we say about 6 to 8 individuals. So in this case, it would be about 3 or 4 from the board, and then 3 or 4 members of the community that are not already on the board, but have those different types of networking or connections that would be beneficial to the campaign itself. So that is essentially what they are agreeing to. And then the next question is additional prospects. So this is where we say, if you move forward with the campaign, who would you encourage us to reach out to? And we will say that we don't always get a lot of variety in this, and people were very encouraging about who to approach. And again, all of it's confidential, so no one's going to be going after anyone and saying, hey, Adam said who gives money. But they were able to come up with suggestions, and again, all of those are listed in your big, thick studies. And then the last question that we ask everyone is, what message or idea would you share with the organizers, with the leadership? And this is somewhat of a catch-all type of question. This is where you've had opportunities to address all of these other questions. Is there anything that was missed? It's also an opportunity to have that direct kind of comment to the leadership in this project. And there were a lot of, it was wide-ranging, but we did have some more themes that we kind of categorized. And we had, the project is worth pursuing, but the scope of the project should be reduced. So an example of, or a sample of that would be the quote, "Don't let the perfect project get in the way of getting a meaningful project done. It's a good civic project, good for the city and good for the county." Another one was, "Significant public education is stressed." And the quote is, "Fundraising is one thing and taxes are another. Share with them that a major public information and education plan needs to be completed as part of the whole effort to get this done." There's a general understanding that the city and county must work together to make the project viable. There is a general sentiment that such a partnership will be a challenge, but an effort should be made. And the quote is, "There are projects that are good for everyone, and we all need to come together. At least the conversations need to be had and the idea discussed." The idea that communities need to to invest in themselves was stressed, and the quote is, "There needs to be anchors, public assets that make people and neighbors feel good." I think the pool is one of those projects. We all know we need fire, police, and EMS, but really few ever interact with those things, which is a good thing. And thousands will use this and feel good about it. The next one is, once built, the facility does not need to make a profit, but it needs to break even. And the quote is, "Covering operating costs should be the goal. They don't have to make a profit. They can also transfer existing operational funding to go with swim passes to make it work." And the last theme was, it was stressed that different donors will have different motivations and will be interested in different messaging. And the quote is, "Have as many arguments for the project in your toolbox as possible." So in review, the development information we were able to gather, take all of it into account and put it together into the assessment. It's not necessarily the number that you wanted, but again, as Adam is saying, this is information. This is information to be utilized, and it was valuable information that was gained. There are different potential areas to explore, and those can be a part of the conversation based off of thoughts that have been expressed by the community in this study. And so with that recommendation, based on the pre-campaign assessment study, Swanson House believes a campaign goal of $5 million may be possible for this project. This includes a combination of gifts from individuals, foundations, businesses, and other organizations. Because this number is substantially less than $24 million, it is paramount for the task force, the EDTA, and the Aquatic Center to identify and confirm its public support and funding before the campaign launch. That is if you decide to move forward. And then our closing comments, based on the pre-campaign assessment study and our knowledge and experience with philanthropy across Oklahoma and the region, there is a campaign to be pursued in support of this project. How organizers wish to move forward impacts the potential campaign and its success. Because of the required public funding to make this project viable, defining how organizers would like to move forward will directly impact the final decision of a campaign, including its timing and execution. Swanson House welcomes further conversation if you would like to have that. We fully understand if organizers seek not to pursue a campaign to simplify the funding and timeline. So as I said at the beginning, it might not be the number that you wanted to hear as far as results, but it is still information that can be utilized to lead towards something successful. And as far as the original goal of entering into this project intentionally and thoughtfully and with a passion for your community, I do think that you have achieved that very well. So that is the summary, and like I said, we have your big old binders of information. It also has samples of comments that have been provided by your survey, or by the people surveyed and interviewed. And there's some really good information. You have a wonderful community here, and people want to support that community, and people are passionate about seeing something like this succeed. So it's been a lot of information, and I've thrown a lot at you, and then I'm waving this big old giant binder around showing you that there's even more information. But we want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to ask questions, anything that you heard in this or haven't heard in this that you would like to address.
So in the 3 to 5 million that you say may be available for a project, for this project, do you feel like that 3 to 5 million is for any project similar to this, or is it 3 to 5 million only if it's still a $24 million total project? Like if we scale it back, is there still 3 to 5 million, or will that scale back in relation to the project size?
I think that's a great question. I think that what we found is the 3 to 5 is to support an aquatic center or an asset that supports the community. I think that if you were to scale it back, I don't think that people would say, well, I was only willing to do 3 out of 24, so now I'm only willing to do 1 out of 8.
Okay.
That mapped out.
Close.
Something like that, right?
And I think that it's important to realize that when we started this process, we said we were going to do it differently than what other projects had been done in Pryor. That we weren't going to set this grand scale and go down the path of getting the bond, and then getting estimates, and then getting a study, and then building, and then finding out, oh, we don't have enough money. And start scaling it back after we've done all of that. So I would caution everybody to not go back and just feel like this was a waste of time or a waste of effort. I think this is part of doing what we were asked to do, which was see what the community wants, which was the $24 million. And I think we had a pretty good conversation with the community about what they wanted, and we tried to scale them back. I know all of the task force members talked about that cost. And then we engaged Swanson House, but that's what's different, and that's what's different about, or what has to be done to change the mindset of how these projects should happen. I don't think it should just be shelved because we got to this point. We either need to go back to the task force and let them, or continue to let them look at this like Mike said and say, hey, we need to get serious about what does it need to look like and not just give up. But I think we should all commend this entire task force group for not just throwing out a grand idea and then trying to get it passed and then find out we couldn't do it.
Adam, if I could say too, in the interviews that I had, there was a lot of comments about being thankful and gratitude for communication and transparency. And I mean, I say that because to tag on to what you have said and some of the comments that you've shared with us in some of our meetings, many of the people that we interviewed were very thankful for having the opportunity to give their thoughts and opinions about this.
Sarah, did they give you any kind of indication as to what cost they would feel like they could support?
As far as the project
The
overall
project.
cost? No, no one said anything specifically about a number, and I think that,
Did you get any kind of feel like if we take it down by 10 million, and it would be a $14 million project with a wish list that would include the lazy river and blah, 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 did you get any feeling that, hey, just give us the pool and we can work toward the rest?
no.
Okay.
I will also say I didn't have anything on the opposite end of that, in the sense of no one was saying, if you don't have a lazy river, then it's not worth it, or if you don't have the best slide, then it's not worth it. So on either end, we weren't getting
Oh, that's all right.
details of that. And to echo what Adam was saying, you have approached this in a great manner, and successful campaigns are built on this. It's built on being prepared, being intentional, being thorough in how you explore this. And so, again, it is a commendable project, and not necessarily the number you wanted, but you have successfully done what you set out to do, which is to be thoughtful and intentional, and to put everything in place to set yourself up for success for whatever that project might look like.
I think, kind of maybe to add on to that, or from a scope standpoint, as we're looking at this, we know we've got a build cost and we've got a run cost. And I think one of the things that we also have to incorporate into this is what is our city's ability to fund on an ongoing operational basis as a constraint that we have to deal with, and I have no idea what that number is, but I think it's something that has to be, it won't do us any good to build it if we can't maintain it. And so we have to figure out some way, and I know this isn't an answer any one person has, but I think we need to add it to the scope of the discussion, because it can be a constraint that we have to work under.
I think the answer to that is similar to the rec center, because it set it up in an enterprise and run it like a business. And then with the rec center, we have an increment tax that goes to the rec center, which helps support the majority of the cost through the public, as voted by the public. I think you have to set it up similar to that.
So you're talking about, that solution would be an additional percentage sales tax that goes to fund the ongoing upkeep and maintenance of that.
Yeah.
So, and that's just another part of
That's
the
how the rec
process.
center works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that, it's, and that may be the way that it has to be done, but it's definitely something we have to include in the scope of how we're gonna solve it.
And I think that when I talk about what a feasibility study is, one of the things that I really like about feasibility studies is it takes these, what I call yellow flags, where it's not a deal breaker, it's not something that's major, but it's something that could be questions in the future, but addressing them now allows you the opportunity to explore what those answers look like before you get to the point where you put a shovel in the ground and then you go, oh no, this is suddenly a red flag, not a yellow flag. So finding out what the questions are and then being able to address them and ask them and discuss them is gonna be what helps with that next step. Whatever that next step is.
Great question.
Mhm.
So that's where we see the next phase for the task force going, is taking this study, working in one phase or one way of scalability. Two, of expanding our focus and our reach. I know Mike's had some discussions with Cherokee Nation about some of the relationship that they have been building with other rec centers and that our rec center has, about what a partnership would look like there for ongoing activity passes and studies or funding, which is what was included in here. I do think that there will be some discussions that we have about other partners in the area that we could go look to and see if there was activity or an interest in partnership. I think it was mentioned a couple of times in here, which I think was interesting, that we should look at a county-city partnership. I think that was very good data to have come back so that we can start taking those steps. Again, this was just, I think while it wasn't 24 million, I think it's a good study that if we don't just put it on a shelf and do what some groups have done in the past and just immediately admit defeat and say, well, let's go try something else. I think we have to hang on to this. We have to take the money that we've spent and we need to build to the next phase, not just set it on a shelf and then in 10 years somebody point to that and say, look, they failed too. I don't think we can let that happen. I think this is a step on the way to the ultimate success.
I think it's a big positive that the community is the one that brought up the faces instead of saying, because I mean, when you hear $24 million, that's a big ticket. But they didn't say, oh, we just can't do it. They talked about the faces and that wasn't how it was brought to them. So I think the community, it sounds like the community still wants something. And even if it takes a while to get to the great big idea, but it sounds like they really have a desire to have something like this in Pryor.
I think the important thing for us all to remember is that when this task force was formed, there was a goal, there was a time frame that the task force originally came up with and said we'd like to have, I think the words we used were feet in the water by whatever. But as we got to this, what became more important than that date was making sure that the people of Pryor, the ones that are paying the tax, the ones that will be patrons to this, the ones that understand that we haven't done the best in the past previously with the taxpayer dollars on these bond projects, is that we got to do something different. We've got to look at it differently. And, you know, I know this is kind of echoing what's already been said and not to be redundant, but it was a priority above all to the pool task force and to those that were challenged with this task to make sure that the public understood we were going to do this the right way. That if we ended up having to go a route where tax dollars were needed, that we were going to manage this project in a way that projects haven't been managed. And in doing that time frame that originally, that goal that we had, it became secondary. Okay, so now let's push it out because we know what the public wants. The public wants this. We went to football game after football game and how many thousands of green stickers got stuck on these pictures, and we got the input from the public and the public wanted it. And so on to the next phase, on to the next. And so as we've done this campaign, right, and Sarah's right, it's not the 24 million that the project is, but what that does is that tells us where to start and where to go back to. I don't feel in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think anybody here would, that that's a defeat. I don't feel that not getting the number we want. I think in fact, that's the direction we wanted to go. We wanted to know that here's what we have hypothetically committed, if we could. So the goal now is to continue that same fervor and direction of, we're going to do this right. It doesn't matter timeframes, it'll come. And, maybe partnerships with the county, are those out of the question? No. Are private funding, are there other entities, corporations, a bigger circle that we could go to? Yes, those are all things that we can do. And so I definitely want to applaud everybody that's on this task force and the community that took place in this. This is what we need to do when we're looking at these projects, these multi-million-dollar projects. Instead of, I think Adam said or Fred said, where we come in, we have a picture of what we want, we build it, and then we go, oh crap, now we're way overspent. That wasn't healthy for our community. That put a black eye on us. And so as we go through this, the goal of this task force has been and will continue to be to make sure that we do the right thing with the dollars that are spent on this, regardless of where those came from. So.
I have a question real quick, but first I want to say thank you to all your work and thank you to the task force for sure. I definitely agree this was a necessary step, so I'm very happy with it. You did mention that there were some people that shared that there are foundations around and private foundations. I'm curious if you guys looked into how we would engage with those foundations, whether it's a specific grant process, when they open, and if they even receive grant applications with these types of projects. Is that in the book as well, or did?
So it has a list of all of them, and some of them were repeated many times, as you can imagine. Each one is going to be a little bit different. There are ways to apply for those grants. There are opportunities for fundraising council, similar to what this is, but with fundraising council being a part of that campaign process, that can be a part of that application process, and who also have the expertise and the experience of knowing and working with many of these foundations. So that is an option as far as how do you engage with those. Some of it is just exploration and looking at what those requirements are, what their windows are, what their application process is like. As far as the foundations that we have explored, so when we come up with that 3 to 5 million number, that is based off of the responses from the survey, the interviews, but it also explored some of your area foundations, both within this immediate area and then regional as well, and looking at some of those foundations as well. So I just wanted to address that some of those have been taken into consideration. Some of the opportunities have been part of that 3 to 5 million. I'm not saying that there's not more out there, but there was exploration in this immediate area and the expanded
But
region.
Sarah, it did not include the water resource. Land and water.
Conservation.
It did, and I'm trying to think of what page it's on. There it is, in one of these, in this book. Looking at what part of that would be.
I meant the 3 to 5 million did not include that
It
number.
does.
It does?
So with the land conservation grant, when we looked into it, their typical gift is $500,000, and the highest gift that they've ever done is, I believe, 2.5 million. And so as far as what that looks like, again, these are estimates, but we're addressing the feasibility and the plausibility of what are the chances that they'll do a 2.5, and
Okay.
if 2.5 is the max that they'll do, how far does that 2.5 get you? And so in that 3 to 5, it's taking into consideration the survey and interview responses, some of the foundations that we've looked into, and then that grant was addressed in it. I believe in the study, I think we looked at it as an estimate of 1 million with their participation.
Okay.
We've got, Jackie found a webinar on that grant, and we're gonna do that next week. And then, I reached out to PDG, because they'd written one, I think for Salisaw. And so we're gonna get with Jeff that works with them and find out more specific information on what the maxes are. I'd be curious to know what level of project they gave the 2.5 million to. Do you happen to know?
And I believe the one that PDG worked with, I believe they were awarded it 500,000?
500, I think, on that. So the other thing I think we've got going for us is, we've got kind of a model down the road at Muskogee. Jackie and I went down there last week and looked around and talked to them, started to build a relationship with their administration and all. And it's very similar to what we're looking at in terms of scope, except they don't have a competitive pool. But, you know, Muskogee County's got like 66,000 people in their county. We've got about 40,000 in our county. So there may be some scaling that way because, you know, to kind of Chris's point about the maintenance and the money, you know, I think, you know, we've got to, you know, put a business plan together on what kind of attendance we can expect and all to build a budget. You know, they build in about 30,000 for just straight maintenance stuff right now, but they cash flow. They got about a $330,000 budget is what they have, and it's self-sustaining in that respect. Now, their capital improvement stuff, they just did $1 million renovation. They replastered the pools and stuff, and that was money came from the outside, not from the proceeds. So, but anyway, I think it gives a nice starting point. It's a successful operation, and we can take that and kind of massage that a little bit, maybe to fit our setting. So we're working on it.
Well, I was gonna say, to add on to what Mike was saying about Muskogee is, their park is smaller than what we even presented out to Pryor. And so, where we were talking about, the community was talking about maybe scaling back or something, I think that's a very viable option, looking at how successful they are with less than what we were trying to put into Pryor. I'm not trying to say that we're gonna take things away from Pryor, but just to try to maybe scale something back and then put into those phases some of the other items that they were looking at.
I'm gonna step back a little bit to back towards your comment or question. In fundraising, the framework is 4 steps, and this is a very oversimplified, but there are really 4 steps in fundraising. And it's identification of who you're going to solicit. It's the cultivation, which is very important. You cannot leave that step out. The solicitation, and then the stewardship or the appreciation of the yes or the no of a gift. And it does not matter if you are soliciting an individual, a business, a foundation, a trust, an organization. It does not matter who you are getting ready to solicit. You have to do that cultivation. So even if you are going to a foundation, there has to be a level of cultivation that you do, because they don't really care if you are building an aquatic center or a gym or whatever. It's about, what is this going to do for your community? That is what they are looking for. So just to give them a proposal about an aquatic center, that doesn't do anything for them. They want to know, what is the benefit here? Why are we going to spend this money?
And that's also not a cookie cutter process, because it depends on who you're talking with. And that cultivation is that relationship building, so to understand what is important to them. So we often talk about, we're not fundraising for the concrete or the slide. You're not fundraising for that. You're fundraising for the community opportunities, for the families that are going to be there, for the kids that are going to be not getting into trouble, for the Eco-Devo opportunities. That's what you're fundraising for. So that's what part of that message is. And there are some people who, they want the heartfelt story of, well, so-and-so, little Jimmy was on the, got in trouble last summer because he didn't have anything to do. They want those heartfelt things. And then there's some people who say,
Give me
I want
numbers.
numbers, yeah. And so finding out within that cultivation, within those relationships of what message speaks to them. There's not that, it would be lovely if there could be a cookie cutter elevator speech, but there's just not.
I think when we originally started, when we went out to ball games and we put out there, the expectation when we put these renderings is that everybody wants everything they've seen in those renderings. But from a practical standpoint, only being open 10 weeks a year, I think we have to take a step back as a task force and say what's more practical. I think we've determined the location, so what's more practical and what the community wants. To your point, community just wants something out of it. It's very clear that they want an outdoor pool, obvious, because we survey, and the study answers, it tells everyone that put a green dot on that, yes, we'd love to have that. The community says we can't have that, so let's just have a starting point. So I like the fact that we did this.
And I think, going back to what you said earlier, the community brought that up. And I think that is important because yes, it had been something that had been addressed by this room, but the fact that the community is the one that brought it up, that is important. They also were the ones who brought up the public opportunities, which I think is an important part of that.
How many people,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Fred.
how many people did you interview?
We had 38 interviews and then 11 were surveyed.
But there were over 100 that received the interview packet, and how many received the survey packet?
I think it was a total of,
200, 250?
I think it's in this one. I think overall it was more like 400 were engaged with the
So there were
project.
400 that were cultivated in this project, and then that was how many responded.
How many responded?
38 and 11, so 50
50 out of 400?
responded.
Is that unusual?
It's a little bit lower than we would have liked, yes.
So say,
From what we did receive, from the responses that we did receive, the responses were more overwhelming and more impactful and engaged than what we would normally see too.
I'm sorry, and the number is 346 households were cultivated. And we use the word cultivated because it's not just that we asked 346 households to answer a survey, it's that they were cultivated because 346 households received the test case statement, were given information about what that project would be and what those benefits are. So even when they're not responding, they're still getting that benefit of having that information in a concise way in front of them and see the intentionality. So 346, 50 responded, a little lower as far as the response, but still an opportunity.
And typically what we see is the ones that don't respond at all is pretty much we consider as a neutral. There are some that will respond as a do not contact me. And they will either send it back with a do not contact me at the surveys, or when we call for an interview, they say take me off the list. Those we note as absolute negatives. And we did not, to my knowledge, we did not receive any of those.
Nothing aggressive.
Yeah, nothing, which we have received those at least one or two in almost every.
So your report says that your typical response rate for a study is 12.5%. And that this study had a response rate of 4.5%. So, I mean, I think that's kind of important to,
Absolutely.
out of 100 that you send out, you typically only get 12 back anyway.
Correct.
In our case, you only got 4.5 back.
Right.
Which I think also introduces a question, and I know this is tough. You've given us a number of 3 to 5. What's your confidence level in that number?
Well, our Magic 8 Ball is out of operation, so I can't answer that fully. And I joke with that, but some of it is, it's just, there's no scientific equation on this process. And so we can't, even for those individuals who had said, I would consider giving in this range, that doesn't mean that they're going to give in that range. Some might give more, but some might give less. And so there's no way to pin that down exactly. So what we have to do is use
Science and art.
the art side of it being the interpretation of the information, the likelihood of foundations, things like that.
Research on individuals.
So as far as our certainty, we can't ever guarantee what that number will be. Unfortunately, it would be lovely, but this is our closest
we're pretty
educated
close.
guess.
We're usually.
So historically, when you develop these numbers through whatever process you use, you do have a certain level of confidence that this represents.
We are usually about 90% accurate on that number.
Well, I did like what you said, even though we didn't have the number of people that interviewed and surveyed as sound like they want something, but maybe not all at once. To me, that's a positive.
It seems, I'm with Adam. It seems to me the easiest thing to do here after today would be to just to say no. That would be the absolute easiest thing is, we looked at it, we don't have enough financial support, we can't do this 24 million, and we just say no and we all go on our way. Unfortunately, I agree, the benefits of doing this, I agree. People are just looking for a swimming pool to use during the summer for kids to enjoy, which we've seen in the past. I've seen that personally up front. Rachel ran this place with Band-Aids for a number of years, and the kids flocked to it. So it is an absolute necessity to me to have this. Unfortunately, municipalities in the state of Oklahoma are handcuffed in how they raise funds. It's either by sales tax or utilities. I don't think you could get another increase in sales tax in Pryor, nor could you ask for it, I think, right now. People in this community, too, are so used to what the schools do, but we have the access and availability of the ad valorem taxes, where we can raise bonds of $250 million in 15 years, and it never, ever increases anybody's ad valorem taxes. So I think what the study does is it wakes us up to, okay, what is the extent of what we want to do? I think we start looking for a location that's reasonable, whether it's at the rec center, whether it's at the old location of the old swimming pool, if anything can even be done with that under a reasonable value. And I think we look at other funding ways. I think it guides us to, yes, we need to look for partnerships. It may be the county, it may be OOWA, it may be the Cherokee Nation, it may be other sources. But I think, I agree with Adam. I think we're doing this the right way. The purpose of this shows us, okay, we maybe got to scale back. We need to provide exactly what the kids want. And find a location and find the partnership and maybe just put together that gives them a place to go in the summer, it would seem. So I do not think this is a waste. I think it just pushes us and moves us towards the directions we've got to look at.
But I mean, it was a positive and an answer, like gave us beneficial information, but then it also posed other questions that, like us as a task force and like the ETA need to work on and answer as we move forward.
I think this gives the task force its direction. And I think it's now more important than ever for that task force to continue and to stay after it with some energy. I think maybe we can even move a little quicker in this because we know what direction we need to go in.
I think so. How long do you find that your study is relevant for? Do you think this would be relevant if we move within the next 5 years? Is it 1 year, 3 year window? Not that I want it to drag out that far, but I think that's something that kind of helps Mike's.
6 months, yes.
Mike and I we can't do that.
Well, and to that
You're
question,
young.
with other campaigns that have a study and then immediately move into a capital campaign, even in those timelines, you're in the quiet phase for the first half of that. So the person who's been interviewed might not have any sort of awareness until 2 years later.
Okay.
And the reason you have a quiet phase and a public phase is, in the quiet, you never want to start your campaign saying, we're doing a $12 million project and we've raised $0. Because most of the public, they're like, yeah, good luck with that. And then all of the naysayers come out and completely ruin everything for you. But you come out into the newspaper and say, we have launched a $12 million project and we have raised $6.1 million. All of a sudden, a bunch of people want to join your project and your naysayers go back into the wall. So you still get a few of them, but not nearly as many. So, and sometimes that could 12 to 24 months, depending on how aggressive your committee is.
And the information about the quiet phase and the public phase and the information about the 4 steps, there is information in this. I keep referencing the giant binder, but there is information that helps to put a little bit of that into place for moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for your work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And as I said, it was a joy to be welcomed into your community and to get to know you more and to get to hear about your history and experience and to see the passion and the dedication to wanting something for your community is really rewarding. And to see your responses of saying, this is something we are still passionate about is a really great place to be. So I commend you all on this and encourage you to explore further and to reach out if you have any questions. We're still here.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
You wanna take a vote on that? No? We're good. Well, that works for me, doesn't it?
So I heard your place down there.